Britain's top 10 highest paid bosses earn a combined total of £118 million, and the pay of some top earning Footsie 100 executives is more than 400 times the average salary of their staff. Joining me to talk about executive pay in the UK is David Oakley, our investment correspondent. David, so the research that you've been reporting on today shows that the top 10 Footsie 100 bosses are earning, I think, £120 million nearly, as you can see in this chart. Isn't this likely to attract some criticism, given that we're only 2 months away from a general election?
I think in the words of Roger Barker at the IOD, as sure as night follows day, there will be pay protests and it will become an issue in the general election. It's just the sheer size of the money that the bosses of the Footsie 100 earn compared to what we all do. And I think that will become a big issue, particularly as we get closer to May.
And you mentioned that, you know, it's huge compared with what we all do. I mean, that is a point that you're making, and I think we've got another chart to show that. How does their sort of big packages that we're seeing at the very top of these organisations compare to what the average staff are getting in those businesses? I
think one of the key figures is you see the average Footsie 100 CEO pay is now 4.2 million. That's gone up 10% since 2008, i.e. since the financial crisis. If you compare that with average earnings, which are around 22,000 for all employees, that's been fairly static. And as the High Pay Centre have made clear, the problem is most of us are being told that we've got to tighten our belts, it's austerity, but Britain's bosses are still getting big pay rises and have had a 10% increase since 2008, which is a lot, you know, going from a lot. So I think there is some justifiable concerns about whether bosses are paid too much.
For 5 years, there's obviously been a big focus on investment bankers. You know, they're often among the very highly paid in this country. But that focus seems to have been shifting a little bit this year towards asset managers, another sector in the finance industry.
I think this is interesting. I mean, for the first time, we've seen research from a think tank, New Financial, showing that actually investment managers may well get paid more than investment bankers by 2016. And I think that suddenly hit the consciousness of other industry figures. And the IOD said earlier this week, you know, we should be looking at asset management pay and considering whether these people who are actually supposed to challenge the investment bankers and bosses on their pay, are they being paid too much too? And if they are, that could be a problem.
Because presumably they're not subject to the kinds of new regulations that we're seeing come in and limiting bonuses, particularly for investment bankers.
No, this is true. And the other key point is a lot of investment managers, they don't have to declare their pay. So people don't know what they earn. And that again is another problem that the IOD raises, saying there needs to be more transparency on what asset managers earn so that we can look at them to make sure they are doing a proper job of checking and challenging CEOs on their pay.
And you mentioned that it should be these investment managers that do challenge the UK's biggest corporations on pay. I mean, we're coming up to the sort of annual AGM season in the spring. Are we expecting big shareholder rebellions?
Well, now is the typical time when it will get exciting, and investors are already singling out a number of companies. HSBC, for example, Stuart Gulliver got a very big pay rise, despite taking a bit of a bonus cut, but the sheer size of his pay will possibly be a focus. Given
the scandal that we've had recently about the bank's collusion in tax avoidance and evasion for its Swiss banking clients. Yeah.
Exactly, and the same thing is with a BP. Like HSBC, it's a company that's been a little bit on the back foot, partly because of the oil price. Yet Bob Dudley this week gets a 25% pay rise, and he's in the top 10 best paid Footsie bosses. BP will be again in the spotlight. BG as well is another one that will be, certainly I think we will see some protests there and possibly a big shareholder rebellion over the way they handled the pay of their new chief executive, Helge Lund. And then finally, it's the old chestnut, Sir Martin Sorrell. I have to stress, we have not heard any complaints so far about Sir Martin's salary, but just looking at the charts, the sheer size of his package, 30 million, always raises some hackles, and there's always going to be some protests. So I think WPP again has to be one to look for.
Yeah, well, we'll look forward to that. David, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.